there are some decisions in your life, there are many decisions in your life that when you make that decision, that will change the trajectory of your life. And so you really got to weigh that decision carefully and decide where it is that you want to go. And that's why it's always really good to have in your mind, what is the vision? What's the end goal? Because when you're faced with this decision, you say, well, which path is this going to take me down? Is it going to get me closer to my goal or further away from it? And that's how you make the decision, and then you feel confident in making that decision.
Yeah, every decision that you make, you want to make sure it's in alignment with who you want to be and the life you want to create and the vision that you have. And it comes from the little decisions that you make every single day, waking up, doing your habits, your rituals, your routines, working on your business, reading books, what you consume, to the bigger decisions of what,
moving to another country,
whether you start a business, whether you drop out of school,
whether you start a family, you don't.
All those things make up where you're going to be. And even for both of us, we went down a different path that is unconventional. Many people, we both were fed the go to, school, get a degree, get a job, that sort of path. And it was very difficult to make the decision that was against that and go down a different path and the reason why we did is because we realized that path was not going to lead us to where we want to be. It was going to provide for us getting a job, nothing wrong with that, but it would not have provided for us the life that we really wanted and what we desire. To live in a multi-million-dollar home on the beach in Panama, to have a home in Vancouver, to have a home in Sun Peaks. You're not going to make that happen through going to school and getting a job. So we went down a very different path, and it was all based on what we wanted and getting that clarity, and then just making sure the decisions we made were in alignment with where we want to be.
Yeah.
And so over a decade, this is the result.
Yeah. And sure that came with taking on risk. Yeah. And I think that you have to realize, embolden yourself in life, that I'm going to take some risks in my life, because oftentimes when I take those risks, there's some great rewards to be had. And so for us and myself, I dropped out of university. I could have thought this is a lot of time, a lot of money that now is going to be wasted. Why don't I just finish up and get my degree so that I could, fall back on that if I need to, fall back on that if my business doesn't work out for me. But I made the decision that no, I'm going to build a business. I'm going to make it happen. I'm going to figure out how it works. And if it does, not succeed the first time, then I'm going to try again, because there is no failure, because you're learning from every single experience. And myself personally, when I started with online business, the first thing that I did was I learned Kindle publishing from your course. I actually took Stefan's course and went through it and published my own books. And that's how I made my first dollar online. And that was extremely eye-opening for me, because I was like, I didn't even know people could make money online at the time. I didn't have a computer at the time. I was so naive. But I made my first dollar, and I pretty soon was making a couple $100s a month. And I was like, wow, that's incredible. I was still in school at the time. I was still working at the restaurant, but I was now making income online. And that was just eye-opening. And I think for anyone watching who's experienced that, who's made their first dollar online, that is one heck of a powerful dollar. It's not just a dollar. It has so much meaning behind it. It's a metaphor. And then that led me to, the physical products business, Amazon FBA. And, started there and made a product. And that first product, it did okay, but it's not like I made money from it. I just kind of recouped back my investment. But then that led me to a second product. And that second product was better because of all the experience that I had from putting out that first product. And I made a little bit more money with the second product, but, didn't make my millions. And that led me to a third product that was even better because of all the prior experience. And that product, I built a brand around, and that product made me my millions. Yeah. And so you never want to just give up after the first failure, because that's just your learning experience. You're only going to fail if now you just give up and it goes to waste.
Yeah. I think both of us, we both, at least for me, but I knew that this was the only way forward for me in my life, because I hated school. I was so happy to get out of high school. I barely graduated high school. I never did homework. I never studied. I skipped a lot of school. So I just barely scraped by. I did just the bare minimum to actually graduate. And because it was such a painful experience for me, going to university was just,
Well, you
was
probably
just out of
wouldn't
the
even have
question.
gotten accepted.
No, I did one semester, one class, Introduction to Marketing at Kwantlen College in Richmond, British Columbia. But I didn't even show up for the final exam. I was just like, it's just not for me. Like, I don't learn just by sitting there in a classroom, trying to retain information.
Yeah.
Like I need to do, like, I realized, like, when I compared that to an online business and just the courses that were available, I could learn exactly what I need to know that's relevant, and I can actually learn by doing and applying it. I can sign up for a course, tells you what to do in one video. You go and set up the account, you take the action, you go back to video number 2, tells you the next thing to do. You do, like, it just made more sense. But also the potential, the opportunity, everything that was available was just so much more attractive for me than the path of school or working at a job. And the same thing, like, I can never work for someone. Like, you know, I haven't had many jobs in my life. I worked in the family business, and I worked at a car dealership, and I sold cutlery, Cutco, for a bit, and just none of that. I was like, I just can't be told what to do and just work in that.
But
so all of that, like, I knew that this was the path, and it would work, even in spite of all the failures I had, because I had many. It didn't matter. I was so committed because I knew the rewards were so much more valuable than quitting and any other path that I could go. So there was no other path for me that made any sense or would motivate me whatsoever.
But, you know, so that's you, you know, and there's a segment of people who are just like that, who cannot be employed. They need to be entrepreneurs. They need to be their own boss. They need to be in charge and to not have someone telling them what to do every day. And then there's a segment of people who like to have to be employed. They like to not have to think about different things. They like to kind of just do the same thing day in, day out. And there's nothing wrong with that. Yeah. We need that in our society. We need both. And there's room for both. Yeah. But what you talked about with the you know, how you couldn't sit in school and it was just so hard for you to be in a classroom, that is something that so many kids relate to. I also really didn't like school, but I was quite good at school, but I had to work really hard at it. But it's just the schooling system, the education system is very outdated. You know, this is 20th century education system where we are teaching kids to kind of become factory workers. You sit down when you're told, you don't talk to your classmates, you know, do this test, and it's just the system needs to change because kids don't really learn that way. The
system was designed for the Industrial Revolution, and it was designed to produce workers, not thinkers. Yeah. Right? And basically people that could follow orders, people that could work in the factories and do what they're told. That's kind of what they needed at that time and how the education system evolved.
Exactly. And so, you know, we're not against going to school. We're not against getting an education. But, you know, when it comes to our son Lucas, for example, people might be curious. Are you going to encourage him to go to university? Are you going to encourage him to get, you know, a diploma? And the answer is probably not. If he wants to pursue something like becoming, you know, an engineer or a doctor or a scientist or something like that, where, you know, there's really a lot of information that you need to learn in school, then yeah, that's the path for you. But if he wants to pursue business or do something artistic, you know, forget about school. You don't need school. You don't need to be in that system, because I actually think it would hinder his progress. I actually think it would close him off from his potential, because it makes him do things a certain way instead of him discovering how he wants to do things. It
stifles creativity, and I think, you know, whatever he wants to do, it's ultimately his choice, whatever's going to make him happiest. But I think the thing is, most kids, and especially for us when we grew up, we didn't know there's other options, right? So it's almost like you're indoctrinated to believe from the very beginning, you got to go to school, get good grades, graduate, go to university, get a student loan, you know, get your degree, get a job. Like that was what was sold. That was what was encouraged. That was what was pushed and promoted and sold. And I think for most people today, we live in a very different world. The future is going to be very different.
Well, most kids grow up now wanting to become influencers.
Yeah, being a YouTuber is like the number one, you know, thing they want to be.
So different.
Yeah, so it's very different, and there's so many more options that are now available than ever before because of the internet. AI is going to provide even more options. And so for a lot of people growing up into this world, it's like, if you're to use some common sense, I mean, not unless you really want to be a lawyer, engineer, scientist, etc., then sure, maybe the path of university makes sense. But a lot of people, I think now, that are using some critical thinking and evaluating the options and looking at, if I go down this path, where does that get me? If I go down that path, where does that get me? Because also, it's very different because the cost of living is so much higher today. And the cost of wages has not gone up as much as the cost of housing, the cost of living, inflation. And so it's like, why, you're going to get in all this debt, go to school to get a job, and you're not even going to be able to afford to even actually live, and especially now in families, both men and women would have to work in order to also live. So it's just not as attractive to go down that path.
And I personally think it's borderline criminal how much they're charging kids to get an education. Why on earth is someone going to graduate, a young person just starting their adulthood, graduate from university with $50,000, $100,000 in debt or more? That just makes no sense whatsoever, and is unfortunately very disheartening for people. They're starting off their life in a massive amounts of debt. Yeah,
and if you were to take, the way that I always logically looked at it is that because I didn't invest all the money to go to university, my education, my university was through books, mentors, coaches, seminars, online courses. It was to learn from people. I always thought it made more sense to learn from people that actually have the results that I want. And they've created a course, or they've written a book, or their mentorship or seminar, and I can learn directly from them. And it's 100% relevant to where I'm at, what I'm trying to accomplish, my business, etc. And so I invested a lot into my own education, much more than somebody that probably goes to university. I've invested hundreds of thousands of dollars now to myself. But it's very strategic. And the way I always looked at it is, it's a better ROI. Because if I invest all this money for many years going to university, and at the end of it, I learn a bunch of stuff that I can't even really remember, but I did get a degree and it does lead to a job and making a certain income. For me, the value of that, the ROI, doesn't really make as much sense as opposed to the ROI of taking that money, strategically investing it in courses and information, then also applying it, getting results from it. And so the results and the money that I make from it can then be reinvested also into my growth and my development. And so I'm not in debt at the end of it. I never got into any debt really in my pursuit of getting to where I'm at.
But also, doing what you did, you're investing in the education that you're interested in. And that's why you're retaining it.
That's why I hated school, because I was like, why do I have to learn this? Why am I doing this? It's not relevant for my life in any way.
I've forgotten most of what I learned in university. I hate to say it, but I have, because I'm just not interested in it. You're not going to really retain something unless there's some interest there, or unless you hammer it into your head.
And most people that do get their degree for whatever it is don't even end up getting a career in that field that they study.
Exactly.
They change their mind. I had so many friends went to school for accounting, they got their degree, and now they're doing something totally different because they realize that's not for them.
So there is an argument that the reason you go to school and the reason why you do all these different classes, why they encourage you to take all these different classes, and some of them are required, is to branch out and try different things so that you can figure out what it is that you're interested in. And that's important because as a kid, you don't really know. You don't know if you have a hidden talent that you have yet to discover because you've never had the opportunity to go out and play, floor hockey, or, you're artistic or whatever it may be. So it gives you an opportunity to explore different fields. But my argument is that you could do that just in everyday life. And when you look at kids who are homeschooled, and they encourage kids who are homeschooled, they're out playing in the garden, they're traveling, they're doing different things as part of their education. They outperform kids in traditional schooling system every single time. If you actually look at what the research shows on homeschooling, they're outperforming kids in traditional schooling. And I think a big part of it is because they're learning things that they're interested in. And you don't want to underestimate the kids and think, they're not going to apply their minds to things that are difficult, like mathematics and geography and what science and whatnot. But no, a lot of kids actually, when they are able to pick it up and choose the subject that they're interested in, they will learn it and absorb it a lot quicker.
Yeah, I think like there's definitely value in still going to school. Like you learn great things, you know, don't get me wrong, but I still challenge the value that you get from it as opposed to some other alternative ways of learning and educating yourself.
Yeah.
But also I think, you know, not everybody is able to be like self-motivated and self-disciplined. Like they kind of need a structured university system that guides them along rather than, you know, for me, I did my own education self-directed.
Yeah.
I'm going to take this, okay, I'm going to learn this, I'm going to pick up this book, etc. And many people might not do that, right? And so, but I do wonder whether or not that is also the result of, there's a level of conditioning and programming that takes place in the education system from the time you're a kid, you know, going to kindergarten. You're kind of in a way taught and conditioned and programmed to not be able to direct yourself, you know, and just kind of needing this structured system that guides you along. And I think even many people, they struggle with maybe the idea of being an entrepreneur because they need someone, as you said, to tell them what to do and give them the assignments and give them the project, and then they can work within that. But I wonder how much of that is because of the programming and conditioning that has existed at a young age.
And maybe because you hated school and you skipped so much school, you were able to avoid the programming and developed a critical thinking mind on your own.
Maybe. Yeah. No, it's really interesting to discuss and to, yeah, you know, I think there's a lot of alternatives, and that's what's exciting today. There's many other alternative ways of living, many other alternative ways of education. And these are all things, you know, for us has kind of shifted now being parents, because now we think about these things for Lucas and how he's growing, how he's developing. It makes you question everything that's been told to you.
Yeah.
And you evaluate it and use critical thinking. You get different viewpoints. You can hear other people's experiences.
Yeah.
Homeschooling, unlearning is like another field.
Well, the key is the critical thinking. I know we've highlighted this quite a bit, but like the key is the critical thinking, because you do have to question everything. And the more critical thinking I do, the more I realize that usually what is popular or what's common or what's, you know, the norm is oftentimes not really what's the best option. Yeah. And so a lot of the things that I do and, you know, the way that I've chosen to raise Lucas and the decisions I've made in my life have not followed what is the norm and have skewed away from that, because I've looked at things and I think that you don't really get to make a decision on something until you see it from all the different sides. Maybe there's one side, there's two sides, maybe it's multifaceted, and you have to think of all the possibilities. And then from that point, you can make your decision on what your view and what your perspective is. Because until you can step outside of your current view and put yourself into the shoes and see things from a different perspective, you're not really seeing things for how they are. And that makes it very hard to make a decision based on the reality of the situation versus making a decision based on just your current view.